I'm sure these very well-researched presentations that you've just heard must have raised several questions in your minds. Although we've exceeded our time limit, but we still have, we can devote some time to questions and answer session. So if there are any questions, please.
Sir, excuse me for speaking twice a day. It's already enough to speak once a day. But no question, actually one comment for Mr. De Silva's speech, which you have just delivered about the nuclear and the theft and the misdeeds about. You mentioned about a couple of incidents about Pakistan's, and a book, you showed that there is a book. Actually, to understand Pakistan's nuclear compulsion, you got to read Pakistan in detail. Pakistan probably is the most misunderstood country in the world at the moment. Ladies and gentlemen, this is for all of you. Pakistan has existential threat, and Pakistan has not adopted the nuclear option by choice. It has adopted nuclear option by compulsion, especially after 1974, when we thought ourselves to be very much sensitive and vulnerable. And secondly, you got to be very objective when you see that anything going in the hands of terrorists. If you analyze past decade, you would realize and understand that Pakistan is the only country which has stood against these militants. Rest you see what happened in the Arab Spring and Libya and in Iraq and happening in the Middle East, and the last final speaker speech was also about that, ISIS. So it is not very easy for Pakistan nuclear capability is not a joke that it goes into the hands of the terrorists. So a couple of articles in Washington Times or in the New Yorker magazine and a couple of movies by Bollywood or Hollywood cannot give this capability into the hands of terrorists. And secondly, last speaker about the ISIS, I just want to say that your research is very good, but I would urge all the audience to go and read about the Edward Snowden. What does he say about the ISIS? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
My question is for Qasim. It's about public diplomacy. It's a theoretical question. Now you talk of non-state actors using public diplomacy. Right? Is that theoretically valid? That is my question. I mean, how do you justify theoretically the fact that non-state actors are using public diplomacy? That's my question.
Thank you, sir, for that question. So as I explained, the concept of public diplomacy is often associated with, has so far been associated with state actors, but after globalization and transnationalism, the ability to operate cross borders, it has given the ability to non-state actors to attain that level of maturity or technical feasibility to engage in the same activities. So that is where the paradigm has shifted. So that is like that's why I said that the correct word would be a paradigm shift that has been made possible because of a change in the environment. So theoretically, it is a sound argument to say even non-state actors, depending on those characteristics I mentioned, minimum institutionalism and political objectives, under those, subject to those conditions only they can engage in public diplomacy.
Yes.
I want to commend all the speakers. I think it's an excellent cast of speakers and presentations. Very briefly, General Kulatunga's presentation on terrorist rehabilitation in Sri Lanka is a very important topic, because in most countries where wars were won, terrorism and insurgency re-emerged. I believe that there are two factors in Sri Lanka that prevented the re-emergence of insurgency. One is Sri Lanka's very successful terrorist rehabilitation program. I think that we looked after our former enemies as our own family and children. We engaged them. The LTT cadres, the child combatants, they went to a nearby school. Some of them are at university today. And the second reason is that the Sri Lankan government kept the security platform in the northeast, despite so much of pressure from certain nations, including those countries in the west, that advocated that the security platform should remain in their own conflict zones, forced Sri Lanka to dismantle the security platform in the northeast. But government did not. And I think that as long as the security and intelligence structures remain in the northeast, any attempt at revival could be detected and disrupted. I have one question for General Kulatunga. The model that you presented, 6+1, this originally was created in Singapore. But we only had 4 prongs. But once the model came to Sri Lanka, it developed into 6+1. They added 2 additional components and focused on the reintegration one. Today, of course, the UN itself accepts that there are 3 top models for rehab. One is Saudi, other is Singapore, other is Sri Lanka. So Sri Lankan model is highly commended. You have done a research after rehabilitation, after reintegration. Don't you think that this research should continue to assess the changing attitudes and the opinions of those ex-combatants? Because there's a new landscape now in the north with the TNA coming. The TNA is somewhat separatist. They still haven't abandoned separatism. So I personally believe that there must be continuous survey to study the changing attitudes and opinions. Because people are, if you influence them in the negative way, they will go in that direction. If you influence them in a positive way, they will be champions of peace. What is your opinion? Do you think the Commissioner General of Rehabilitation or any other agency, a research university like KDO should continue to do this kind of research that is so important for the national security and national development of this country?
Thank you very much, sir. I totally agree with you to the fact that the Sri Lankan model has given some kind of an eye-opener to the whole world. I did not aware that this model was imported from Singapore. I was only studying the model that was initiated from in the Sri Lankan context. But coming back to your question about the continuous assessment or study into this one, I agree with you. Because when I was talking to these rehabilitated ex-combatants, I found there was a very rigorous system adopted during the rehabilitation process. They were very closely monitored, closely associated, and also very closely analyzed. All these 6 components and +1. But however, after the reintegration, after they were released to the society, there have been some kind of gap to analyze further into the reintegration part, whether they have been 100% reintegrated, they have been 100% socialized, 100% accepted by the society. In my research, I found between 18 to 20% of these rehabilitated and reintegrated ex-combatants are not happy with the conditions prevailing. So this is a kind of an area where we need to continuously assess. So I totally agree with you, sir. We need to continue with this assessment as well as the intelligence gathering and analysis of information coming in from these areas, because otherwise, as I mentioned in my research, this conflict trap theory might be applicable in Sri Lanka if we don't address these issues. Thank you, sir.
Yes, please. Any more questions? Yes.
Sir, I please to forward this question to Major General Ruwan Kulatunga, sir. Sir, under your findings, we have recognized psychological reintegration. So, military clandestine operations are continue. Have you recognized any effects on these military clandestine operations of the psychological reintegrations?
Yes, of course. In my research, I found that these ex-combatants are living in some kind of a psychological trauma. They are living in kind of a fear. They know exactly the government agencies are behind them. So that fear, on one side as the state security or the national security aspect, we have to admit that we need to assess the situation as Professor Rohan Gunaratna said. But revealing this aspect to the reintegrated ex-combatants, they are getting into this trauma because they know that these agencies are behind them. So the psychological aspect of reintegration is very important because the culture of Sri Lankan Tamils, especially in the north, they don't say what they feel. Even if you ask a question, they might say something else, but they are keeping something inside. It's very, very difficult to reveal what is inside of them. So it's very difficult thing. That's what in my findings I have said. The psychological reintegration is something which cannot be seen. All three aspects that I have given before that can be seen. Social, political and economical you can see, but not the psychological reintegration. So as you said, they are having some kind of a doubt and some kind of fear, thinking that they are still being followed, still being monitored. But that can be rectified by some kind of analysis that should be adopted in Sri Lanka. I suggest, in my research I have suggested, it should be a hybrid one, both academic and military. Academic and military, it should be a hybrid one. In my research I have very clearly explained in that. Thank you.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, sir. Troop Fund of the HSM Fernando from.
Yes, please. Yes.
Good evening, sir. Troop Fund of the HSM Fernando from Intech 30. Anyone of the panel can answer this question. My question is, as we all know, Sri Lankan military forces were able to eradicate terrorism from this land. But when we go to Google and just type Sri Lankan military forces, what we get it's all about is war allegations against Sri Lanka. This situation is so sad. So we need to address for this issue because we all know that LTT were committing violations against civilians. They recruited child soldiers. Likewise, they committed huge violations of international humanitarian law. But now nobody's talk about this issue. They all are talking about what Sri Lankan forces did in the last few period of the war. But they did not talk about how LTT used innocent civilians as human shields in the last few period of war. So, sirs, what do you all think about this issue? Because this is the place where Sri Lankan military, this is the place where we are going to survive in the future. So we need to protect this. Therefore, I think this is one of significant area which we need to be addressed. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for the question. Yes, we all know that Sri Lanka is being targeted mainly by the international media. Influenced again by the Tamil diaspora, I should say, Tamil diaspora living abroad, and they accuse the government of Sri Lanka as well as the government forces of violating human rights. and murdering civilians during the conflict. And we all know the latter part of the conflict, how it was ended. And we have clear evidence as how the LTT was containing the civilian bloc within their territory, within this so-called high security zones in their areas. And how they prevented the civilians being get away from their control. We have a lot of evidence to say that. And the second point is, during this type of a conflict, where the government forces are restricted to use their long-range weapons and high-trajectory weapons against the adversaries, we were forced to defeat the terrorist only by physical means, physically assaulting each and every bunker in that particular high grounds. By doing so, especially during night, it was so difficult. Invariably, there were some civilian casualties, but still the evidence has not been proved 100% whether it is by the LTT or by the security forces. The investigations are going on. I cannot reveal on those things. I cannot comment on those things. The next UN report will be published next month. So we'll have to wait and see what evidence that the international community has gathered against the Sri Lankan government. Then we'll have to answer those things. Thank you.
And sir, let me add a few
Last question,
words
please.
to what you said. He brought up an important point about Google searches. In this today's day and age, Google has eased the eyes and ears of most of the community towards the outer world. So what happens is, this is a paradox. No matter how much information we have on the websites, on the World Wide Web, what comes up on the search results are the websites that people visit the most. So for some reason, the news articles and websites that create sensational articles are the ones that rank up. So that is a technological question we have to answer. So no matter how, people are not interested in these investigations, how they are carried out and what is happening. So that is an interesting point we'll have to work towards solving.
Yeah. Can I?
Yes.
Yeah, one question, Ruan. This is about your rehabilitation and reintegration. I think you did a very good presentation. You had a lot of analysis. Is there a parent organization now that is monitoring? And you said about 18% are dissatisfied. Is there where the people can come back? You know, there are a lot of problems, especially on livelihood. You know, jobs. What I was told is some places they are rejected. You know, rejected by the Tamil communities. So, is there an organization to look into their problems? I mean, there must be continuity, or all the effort will go down the drain. You know. There must be continuity, and especially on their livelihood and their problems, psychological, social problems. Can you comment on that, please?
Sir, thank you very much for the question, sir. During my research, I didn't find any government organization on this particular aspect, sir. It is the Commissioner General of Rehabilitation who has been tasked to do the rehabilitation only, but the reconciliation part or the resettlement part specifically to address this those who have not been satisfied is not been assessed yet, sir. That is what in my research I have recommended to have some kind of a special bureau, special commission to look into these matters, sir, having understood the information and analyze them on ground, sir.
Yeah, I think to carry forward, I think you must recommend through the Chancellor to the Army Headquarters, to the MOD, to create an organization where they can, I mean, there are a lot of people, a lot of the ex-LTT people who have problems, for them to come back, fall back, to solve their problems. Otherwise, the entire thing might go down the drain, you know. It's very, very important. Thank you.
In my personal opinions, I did not recommend, in my report, I did not recommend a military alone organization. It should be a hybrid one, sir.
No, it can be a civilian organization with
Civilian
military
organization.
representation.
But not only a civilian, sir, there should be some kind of a military favor also because of the intelligence part involved in this, sir. We need to analyze and assess continuously of the behavior of these reintegrated ex-LTT combatants.
It's also very important that, I mean, you give them solutions, you know, very not only organized, so the military can be represented, but they must be given solutions. If you're talking about the conflict trap, you can avoid that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Well, before we conclude the session, I must say that chairing this session was very challenging for me because the subjects that we have dealt with were mostly on issues related to Sri Lanka, and the speakers knew more than the chair. But still, that will not make me shy away from making a few comments. Well, Sri Lanka, of course, is grappling with post-conflict challenges. And there are several things which are still to be dealt with. And the presentations that I've heard make me believe that all-out efforts are being made to find solutions which are indigenous and driven by national leadership, keeping in view the local culture and, of course, available resources. On the question of diaspora, I have my own comments on that because we also have a diaspora abroad, and I consider it as a source of capital and brain power. We heard that diaspora is either regular or is political. I think there has to be another category, because if someone crosses the threshold of being political is not wrong, because if you are associated with any mainstream political party back home, it is something. We have our nationals abroad in millions who are associated with political parties in Pakistan. But once they cross the threshold, we should have another category of diaspora, which is the anti-state diaspora, because if they're causing instability in the home country, then they are no more political, they're anti-state elements. This is my first observation. And then I am very pleased to hear from the General that the data that he collected, having been piqued by UNDP's concept of conflict trap, the data that he collected led him to the conclusion that majority is satisfied with the steps that are being taken by the government. But as Mr. Rohan said, that there has to be a continuity in the process of its evaluation about their sentiments. Another thing is, of course, there is a need to revive the security structures and have a comprehensive national security policy. This is true everywhere, because there are new kinds of threats that have emerged with the changing times. The monopoly of violence has always rested with the state. But there are now many powers or non-state actors who are negative powers which are challenging this monopoly of the states. So there has to be some form of comprehensive national security policy. And I wish to Mr. Vikramasinghe that assure him that sovereignty is, of course, indivisible and inalienable, and will remain so. It will remain absolute. I'm coming from a Muslim country, so that's why I'm saying it. We don't call it Islamic State. We call that group Daesh. This is our official policy. Because when you say Islamic State, then it has different connotations. Lastly, I would very briefly say a few words on because apprehensions were quite apparent in the presentation, the first presentation about Pakistan's nuclear program. I assure you that we have a very multi-layered, multi-structured command and control and security structure of our nuclear arsenal, and we have in place a comprehensive export control regime. Also, the legislative, regulatory, administrative and enforcement measures of this regime are at par with the missile technology control regime, with the nuclear suppliers group and with the Australia group. There are certain conditions that are laid down with it. And these measures have been appreciated not only by the Director General of IAEA, but also the Hague Summit that was held recently on nuclear safety. I wish to assure you that these books that are being written have political connotations and have nothing to do with facts. Our safety measures have been praised by the United States, and they are at par with any other nuclear power. So once again, I thank the university for giving me this opportunity, the Vice Chancellor, and I stand educated at the end of this session. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, sir. That was indeed a very interesting and fruitful discussion. I would now like to call upon the session chair to award certificates to the participants of this session. K.S.C. De Silva, M.A. Kasim, Major General Ruan Kulatunga, Colonel Chandana Wickramasinghe, H.D. A.K. Amaravardhana, A.Y. Wickramasinghe. Now I would like to call upon General Hettiarachchi, former Commandant, to present a token of appreciation to the session chair. Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, we are a little tight on time, but we'll take a short break. So I will invite you to proceed for refreshments, but please be back in your seats in 15 minutes. So that will be around 3:20, 3:25. Please be back in your seats by 3:25 to start the fourth and final session for the evening. Thank you.